Give people who are making $100,000 or less as a family a tax credit, which will benefit and uplift 60% of black families who are in poverty.
So by default, it affects black families, but there's not a particular policy for African Americans that you would explore.
So I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No, because whatever benefits that black family will benefit that community and society as a whole and the country, right?
Well, as Senator and failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris just got through explaining, she's not going to do something that only benefits black people. That's how it is on Capitol Hill. Everybody makes sure to tell black people in a heartbeat why we can't just do something that only benefits you guys. Well, it's obvious why that is. If they were to do something that only benefited black people, well, I mean, it's not like they single anyone else out. And as far as black economic results go, as far as bolstering the black community's economics, well, we need something that helps everyone. It can't just be singling out one group. So it's not as if we're going to be seeing anyone else deciding to, oh, wait. You see, that line about we can't do something that's only going to benefit black people, that is blatant anti black racism. They never say that to any other groups. And please don't give me any garbage about, well, it's because of Asian Americans and the fact that they've got their economy in order. This is not a matter of economics in that sense. This is a matter of starving the black community specifically for resources. Everybody else can get it. There's no problem with dropping $8 billion to every other group except for us. When black people show up all of a sudden, well, we ain't got it, or you shouldn't get it, you don't deserve it, or if black people get even 1 penny, everybody else must get $10. Everybody else must get $10 for even 1 penny that a black person gets. This is about maintaining a black wealth gap, a wealth gap between black people and everyone else. Because that is how the racial pecking order manifests itself, through a lack of resources in the black community. This is deliberate and it is racially coded. Grace Ming tweeted on March the 3rd that misinformation and xenophobia about coronavirus have hit Asian American owned businesses hard. Congress must pass legislation I've introduced, along with some woman, Nydia Velasquez. She's not even Asian, but you see what we have here is we have immigrants who have decided that they're going to close ranks. Nobody's pointing out that black people are being gentrified out of Queens, being gentrified out of Brooklyn, being gentrified out of all points in between in New York. Nobody points to that. Nobody mentions that. You would think that if Miss Ming was so dang hot and bothered about making sure that small businesses stayed afloat, she would start with the black community, but she's not. As far as she's concerned, she's here to represent Asians. That's fine, but the thing is, this is somebody who would stonewall legislation that would be of benefit to black people. And she wanted to make sure that her legislation was okay, can't fight for grants, that might be a bridge too far, but we can demand interest free loans, which is the next best thing. She wanted legislation passed immediately. We're going to make sure that Asian businesses, because those are the ones that she's talking about, she specifically links Asian owned businesses to interest free loans legislation she's fighting for. She's not sitting there telling Asians, you think I'm going to do something that only benefits Asian people? No, she doesn't do that. But then again, Asian candidate for president Kamala Harris, the Asian senator from California, she happens to be on the same page. Her silence speaks volumes. Just understand that when it comes to us, it's we're not going to do something that only benefits you. Everybody else, hey, we need something that benefits this group. This group is being hit hard. Why? Misinformation and xenophobia have hit Asian owned businesses, and we need as much money as possible, free money, to be dumped on them. Now, that goes against free market principles. If these Asian businesses are really being hit so hard, what they need to be doing is applying to banks. Same thing that happened with the 2008 economic crash. What you do is you apply to a bank and, well, you go ahead and you let economic Darwinism take its course. The businesses that show that they can hang in there for the long haul, those, I mean, after all, aren't there Asian banks that these Asian businesses can go to? Can't these Asian American businesses go to the Asian banks in their area? Jason Black did an entire documentary, Race War, where he pointed out a number of Asian banks in these Asian American enclaves. Why are they not going to them? This is not a situation that calls for the federal government to ride in on a white horse and be giving out taxpayer money to businesses that who need to be proving to the private sector whether or not they're viable. But you got Grace Ming saying the federal government's job is to keep Asian businesses afloat, when that's actually the job of the businesses themselves. They need to be going to banks asking for loans. They don't need to be going to the federal government. Because I'm sure that's what black people are told. Nobody would be saying, well, black small businesses, well, they need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. These businesses really aren't that great to begin with. And, well, the marketplace must decide. Oh, there's just nothing we can do. The money's not there. Second that you're not talking about black people, all of a sudden, we got billions. Grace Ming's next tweet, just a couple of days later, she was in the same freaking tweet. She went from saying that the House and the Senate had passed a provision based on her legislation, her and her co-conspirator, Nydia Velasquez, for $7 billion. Well, she's sitting here crowing. Yeah, we got that $7 billion bag. We got it. And then in the very next tweet under it, she points out that Trump is expected to sign an $8.3 billion. Man, that number just went up in the same freaking day. That number jumped $1.3 billion in just a few moments. The amount of money that the federal government was going to give to Asian American businesses simply on a whim. And notice that it didn't take Grace Ming any 15 or 20 years. Notice how it didn't take Grace Ming and her cohorts hearings in Congress, and the Congress needed to have hearings, and let's bring in some Asian American actors and bring in some Asian American blowhards who are going to sit there and say, well, this is about sympathy, and well, the small business measures that you could give, they can take many forms. It doesn't have to be money. Notice how they didn't do that. The Asian Americans were not made to jump through any hoops. It didn't take them having tons of interviews. They just snapped their fingers and said, hey, we need at least $7 billion. Done. No, they didn't tell the Asian American businesses, we got to go around the world in 80 days. And we're going to have to talk about, we need to have a study. A study must be performed. We're going to have legislation to talk about a legislation, to talk about studying whether or not these Asian American businesses should get anything. The common sense would say, no, you need to be going to banks. This was not something that was done to you. This was just a matter of something happened in China, you got caught up, and that is that. They didn't do that. What they said instead is, well, it doesn't matter who's responsible. What matters is these are Asian American businesses. Oh, well, these are small businesses, but it's going to be mostly benefiting Asian Americans because that's who Ming targeted towards, her exact words. And here you go. This is about resources. That's the reason why in her follow-up tweet where she was just bragging about, oh, we got 8.3 billion, she says critical to dedicate the resources needed to respond to the coronavirus and not forget about the many small businesses that have been negatively impacted. Now, for somebody who happens to be allegedly opposed to making Asians synonymous with coronavirus, she was whining and complaining about how some GOP member of Congress called the coronavirus the Chinese coronavirus. She didn't want to make the two synonymous, but when it comes to talking about coronavirus and getting some money, all of a sudden, well, don't forget that coronavirus has hurt many small businesses, Asian American small businesses. Don't forget about them. It's about those Asian American small businesses. All of a sudden, she doesn't mind linking the two as long as she thinks this is going to help her get the bag. See, if she was concerned about small businesses, then she needs to be talking about the black businesses first. They've been hit the hardest. And it wasn't even a matter of xenophobia or misinformation. There is a deliberate racial boycott against black businesses. Many of those small businesses that Miss Ming is so hot and bothered about trying to get billions of dollars for are the main ones who spread the misinformation and the xenophobia about black people, about black businesses. But she wants to make sure, hey, those resources better be ready and they need to be dedicated because these businesses ought to get it. Nah, she's not telling them let the free market decide. She's not saying we need to have hearings in Congress to talk about it. As far as she's concerned, skip the hearings part. Let's just get to the part where you write a check. And notice the complete lack of pushback by the white members of Congress. You don't see any of them saying, well, wait a minute here. We can't be just throwing billions of dollars at these small businesses. They need to earn that. There needs to be some sort of vetting process. Why the world at billions of dollars? Oh, this is just a windfall for nothing. People who already have businesses, they need to be taking their concerns to the private sector. All of a sudden, that stuff falls out of the conversation. Whenever you have white businesses that are claiming we happen to be a vital national industry, or local businesses are the backbone of the economy, they can get money just like that. Black businesses say, hey, we're trying to build here too. All of a sudden, well, there's no money for you, and why haven't you been shut down? And somebody needs to bring in OSHA or the Board of Health, or we need to bring in somebody to investigate you guys, because you are probably doing something wrong. That's how you know that ranks have been closed against you, because of the consistency of the opposition. They will say one thing to you and exactly the opposite to everyone else. This is how you know there's a program at work. Look at how effortlessly this Ming woman was able to get $8.3 billion. Look at how effortlessly she did that. No hearings required. You would think for something of this nature, people would be saying at the very least, well, shouldn't we have a conversation about it? No conversation necessary. This isn't black people we're talking about here. If it's black people, well, they need to justify it. They need to explain it. They need to make a case of some sort. They really don't have a leg to stand on. Notice how they didn't have any hearings where you have point and counterpoint. See, they didn't bring in any clowns who were on the payroll of the white right to say, well, Asian American businesses need to be going to banks. They don't need to be getting federal money. It's not the federal government's job to prop up local businesses. It is local businesses' jobs to either thrive in the environment they're in, or what happens is they go out of business. They are responsible for their own fate. We can't. Isn't the government basically nationalizing small businesses when they do this? Nobody did that. Nope. There was not going to be a platform to try to give any sort of prominence or any sort of ability for somebody to have a platform to say Asians shouldn't be getting this money. They didn't do that with them. They just said, okay, let's cut the check. We're going to go ahead and write you guys a check. That's how you know this is a program at work. This is about strangling the black community for resources. So what does that tell you when it comes to reparations? See, there's your reparations money right there. The problem isn't that they don't have it. It's a matter of this is an anti-black racialist policy of extermination. This is a deliberate policy of economic strangulation of the black community. This is targeting us. As I have been teaching you for almost a decade and a half, when it comes to genocide, genocides are not typically carried out the way the Nazis did. You don't typically round everybody up to some nondescript place on the outskirts of town and then shoot everybody dead. That's not typically how genocides are carried out. Genocides are typically carried out through resource deprivation. You go ahead and start strangling people for the basic necessities that they need. And what will happen is when people are deprived of the ability to keep a roof over their heads, when they're deprived of the ability to keep food on their table, when they're deprived of the ability to get access to medical care, what happens is their numbers begin to dwindle. And that's what you see going on here. This is how you need to understand for all those people out there who apparently are trying to make a show of what they know what it is the white supremacy wants to see. White supremacy wants to see any Negro who will help to reinforce the racist pyramid scheme that is the racial hierarchy in America. If you're going to go ahead and reinforce that, then they'll go ahead and give you a platform for that. It's important that black folks get out there and show we are so concerned about immigrants. Well, when they say immigrants, they're not talking about black immigrants. The black immigrants will get some sort of minor dispensation, some sort of minor consideration, but not that much. When they're talking about immigrants, they're talking about mostly Hispanic and Asians, what they're talking about. So if you're black and you're willing to get out there and you're willing to help reinforce that, which is a matter of a policy that white supremacy is very much interested in, then what happens is they'll make you prominent and they won't attack you for it. When you start advocating for black people, all of a sudden this must be stopped. There is not to be any advocacy for black people whatsoever. Well, you better make sure that there's somebody there to balance it. The white media did not at all examine this and say, wait a minute here, what's this $8 billion? What the world is this about? Aid to small businesses? Wait a minute here. If these businesses don't have a rainy day fund of their own, it's not the government's job to be propping up every mom and pop shop or every Asian business in America. Is that what's going to happen? Are they going to become, all of them are going to be subsidized by the federal government? Apparently. Apparently, the Asian American businesses are now going to all be subsidized by Uncle Sam. You know, if these Asian American businesses were really so concerned about the damage that coronavirus has done to their reputations, why are they not suing the Chinese government? Shouldn't they be suing the Chinese government and saying, hey, first it was SARS, then it was bird flu, and whatever the hell you want to call this? You guys are absolutely decimating us. You owe us damages because you guys refuse to get a control of this. You refuse to control those flea markets where you're selling all kinds of wildlife that have got all kinds of diseases. And because of this, it has built and built until it's finally culminated in this. You've had at least 17 years since SARS, and you haven't done a doggone thing to clean up your act, and now you owe us because of the damage that you have done to us. If they want to file a lawsuit, you think they'd be doing that, but they're not. What this is about maintaining that, well, we don't want any more damage to anyone's reputation. Well, it's funny because nobody gave a damn about the reputation of black folks when you had that Ebola case in the United States. Nobody cared about that. Nobody ever cares whenever it's black people. You got black businesses that come under attack every single day by all of these non-black groups who want to use zoning ordinances or who want to come up with specific legislation, or they just start making frivolous complaints. Anything that can be used as entree. I would love to have a conversation with Congresswoman Ming, and I'd like to ask her, just out of curiosity, how many Asian Americans make it a point to spend their dollars with black businesses? Before we start taking black communities' tax dollars and putting them into businesses that in many cases, as we've had video of, we have black grandmothers being assaulted by Asian business owners, and yet Mrs. Ming is not talking about how many Asians spend their money with black businesses. Because we just see it all day long. There are a lot of Asians who don't mind selling black businesses hair weave and such, but they're not about to actually do business with black people. And yet, as soon as the Chinese government's negligence and carelessness leads to a global pandemic, all of a sudden those same businesses are saying, we need tax dollars from everybody. Everybody needs to put something into the bag so that we don't miss a single paycheck. Okay, so black businesses, which by the way, considering black people happen to be the core of the American culture, we have effectively financed and have been able to monetize culture. And since we are the backbone and the muscle of that culture, then it ought to be common sense that the black community in particular needs to be supported and reinforced and backed in every way possible. When you consider the fact that everything that Congresswoman Ming was complaining about, the black community has been suffering for half a millennium. But I want you to see how different the response is when the person it refers to, when the group that it applies to isn't black. Grace Ming makes no mention of this. Where was Grace Ming on the reparations issue? Anybody know? Did anybody see Grace Ming making any tweets about small businesses in the black community and how they need support and the racism against black businesses? Anybody recall that? Me neither. So I'm going to go ahead and end this right here because what the hell else needs to be said about it? But I want this one to stick with you. I want you to see how different the response is when it is non-black people making the demand. Now, a lot of you who are trying to figure out some way to make sure that you change the subject, and it's obvious you got some clowns out there who either these or some of these soft-core wannabe white liberals or what have you, please miss me with that garbage about the Congressional Black Caucus. This is actually their fault. You ought to start asking questions about where the Congressional Black Caucus gets their money from. A large amount of the negligence and the refusal to do anything for black people that the Congressional Black Caucus does is in large part bought and paid for. Benign neglect means controlled opposition. You, of a necessity, in order to keep large groups of people enslaved and oppressed for the long haul, you're going to have to get certain elements from among their own ranks to help out in the oppression. You're going to need controlled opposition. This is where the Congressional Black Caucus comes in. Anytime somebody is talking about something about we need money for Asian American small businesses, the Congressional Black Caucus, if they were of actual interest to the black community and not just a bunch of mostly bought and paid for turncoats, then they'd be the main ones saying, we cannot have racially targeted economics coming from the federal government. Why? It has to be something for everyone. But of course, if they did that, then they wouldn't be controlled opposition. Now, would they? This is a big part of the mission that stands before the former slaves. Those of us whose ancestors and who ourselves, our blood, sweat, toil, and our deprived economy, the money we've been deprived of every day ever since chattel slavery allegedly came to an end, all of that is part of the accrued debt that the country owes us. And more importantly than that, we should make it very clear, all of this demanding studies and HR 40 and a congressional hearing, you see what the hell happened in this case, didn't you? No hearings, no studies, no examination, they just cut the check. That lets you know they're running game on you, but some black folks, they're going to be playing along with it because, well, there are some people who are so weak of spirit, weak of mind, and who happen to be so degenerate in their mentality that they have internalized the anti-black racism, the white supremacy practices every day, because that's really what happens when they start trying to make equivocation for it and they start trying to gloss it over and start trying to say, well, maybe if we was not. Nobody goes up to Grace Ming and says, well, you know, maybe you shouldn't have that. If she had not gotten it, you wouldn't have anyone trying to justify it. They would say it was wrong on his face, period. We have to have a zero tolerance policy for this idea of black people are not deserving of. We ain't deserving nothing. We've earned it. And we have spent every day of 500 years earning it. The pretend, phony, baloney, completely made up opposition that you're seeing from certain elements on the right where they bring China in for a little bit of abuse. And then the pretend phony outrage that the Grace Ming show, it's all part of political theater. Both of these groups are playing to their particular constituencies. And in the end, when it comes time to get serious, when it comes time for what really matters, for the money to change hands, that bag gets handed off without a beat. They don't skip a beat. Here you go. Gee, whatever happened to all of that Chinese coronavirus talk? Didn't that mean anything? Nope, didn't mean a damn thing. See, this is the con game that the left and right political hands of white supremacy have been playing. Both of them are simply playing to their constituencies, keeping them engaged, keeping them on board, and making sure that they get their resources. There's a certain amount of talk, a certain level, a certain type of rhetoric that those on the white right want to hear, and a certain type of rhetoric that those on the Asian side want to hear. That's what happens. But when the rubber meets the road, when it's time for the conversation to get serious, the money is going to flow in that direction and nobody will bat an eyelash. Nobody's even going to examine it. And if this reminds you of the bailout that Wall Street got back in 2008, you're not wrong at all. You see what's going on here. You see exactly what's going on here. So when you got people who are trying to tell you that, oh, we need to be feeling very sorry for certain groups because, well, you've had Donald Trump and some xenophobes who have been, man, tell them save it. Tell them save it. They're running game. They're trying to get some quickie sympathy so that they can then turn that quickie sympathy into a demand for an $8 billion payout. Forget that. You want to find some real grievance? You look at the black community. We got the realest grievance that there is. You make sure you remember this moment. Make sure you remember this particular example. You will be seeing others like it. But when it comes to reparations, this is the reason why Jason and Tariq and I have been saying and a few others, we've been saying for years, All of this crap about there need to be hearings and we need to have a bill passed and well there's a process and well no forget about that. With everybody else there ain't no process. This just goes to show the idiots who are making excuses for well if we can get HR 40 passed this will get us on the road to man we've been telling you it ain't about that. It's not about some process. This is just them stalling and for time, hoping that they can get you off of this issue. They'll say, well, we're not talking about reparations anymore. Something else has come up. A war has come up. A white woman has gone missing. There's yet another flu that's come out of China, and that's more important than you niggers. And that's what they're actually doing. And you will find a lot of non-white people who will be pushing that particular line because, as far as they're concerned, that's right. You are not part of the in crowd. You are not. If you give anything to the niggers, there must be more for us. They understand exactly the con game being played. And you need to understand it as well. So what Grace Ming needs to be told is the same thing that Kamala Harris told the black community. You think we're going to do something that only benefits Asian people? No. We need something that benefits everyone. Because if it benefits everyone, if everybody gets a check, well, that will help Asians too, because Asians are part of everyone. If all businesses, especially black businesses, get a check, that's gonna trickle down. That's gonna help Asian businesses too. But everyone has to get something, not just Asian American businesses. If Asian American businesses get something, everyone must get a check.